interesting times. Today's stories. Migrants attempt to cut through a fence at the Greek-Turkish border. Maduro says the U.S. designed a plan of war for Venezuela. World Health Organization representatives praise Iran's healthcare system. In Wall Street, a trader says there's definitely panic within the financial community. A Vietnamese-American student files a complaint over coronavirus discrimination. Plus, things to know about and how to protect ourselves against COVID-19. This is Eagle News coming to you from Washington, D.C., bringing you stories from around the globe. I'm Ace Ramirez. Migrants on the Turkish side of the border with Greece attempt to cut and pull down the barbed wire fence. The Greek police fire water cannons to deter them. Greek police fired tear gas in clashes with migrants at the Turkish border on Friday, as Athens said a 2016 European Union Ankara deal limiting migration to Europe was dead. Thousands of people have gathered at the border since Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said last week that his country would no longer stop refugees from trying to leave. Greece's Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis accused Ankara of assisting an ongoing surge of desperate people gathering at the border. Turkey agreed in 2016 to stop letting migrants leave in exchange for 6 billion euros, but Ankara says other parts of the EU deal, including improved visa and trade rules, were never fulfilled. Mitsotakis said Turkey was doing the exact opposite of its obligation to hold back asylum seekers. The president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, accuses U.S. President Donald Trump, in collaboration with Venezuela's opposition leader Guaido and President of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, of putting together a plan to generate war in Venezuela and make a military intervention.
Desde la Casa Blanca, desde el norte, se ha decidido un plan para traer la guerra a Venezuela. Se ha decidido un plan para traer el terrorismo a Venezuela, para desestabilizar a Venezuela, para llenar de violencia a Venezuela, para escalar un conflicto de carácter violento y armado y justificar una invasión a nuestro país. Se ha decidido un plan de guerra para Venezuela en la Casa Blanca. Por eso es que Trump se lleva al títere vendepatria Guaidó para allá y luego lo manda a que cumpla tareas de desestabilización interna del país. Y ahora fue citado en la mansión de Donald Trump en Miami, Jair Bolsonaro. Único tema, empujar al Brasil a un conflicto armado con Venezuela. Es el único tema que tiene con Jair Bolsonaro y desde Venezuela lo denunciamos y le pedimos.
Meanwhile, representatives of the World Health Organization in Iran praises the country's healthcare system and says the body can assist Iran with its medicine needs during a press conference in the capital, Tehran.
I think there's a lot of variation in the countries here in the region. Iran has one of the strongest healthcare systems of all the countries in the Eastern Mediterranean region. And I think it stands to reason that elements of the response here have progressed further than in a number of other countries. Nonetheless, you would expect the more developed countries, those with stronger health systems, to be performing better.
Safeguard the health and the health sector in the Islamic Republic of Iran and to contribute with specific measures to improve the situation of the impact of the unilateral sanctions on the health sector, mainly through providing assistance for procurement and supply of essential medicines and supplies to the country.
The death toll from the novel coronavirus in Iran continued to rise on Saturday, with 21 more people killed, including a politician who became the 8th official to succumb to the disease. Health Ministry spokesman Kianush Jahanpur announced 1,076 additional cases had been confirmed in the past 24 hours, bringing the overall toll to 145 dead and 5,823 infected. Jahanpur said during a televised news conference, and I quote, "More than 16,000 people are currently hospitalized as suspect cases." He added that 1,669 people who were sick with a COVID-19 illness have recovered. The Islamic Republic is battling one of the world's deadliest outbreaks of the disease outside China, where it originated. The capital, Tehran, remains the worst-hit province in the country, with 1,539 confirmed cases. State news agency IRNA reported on Saturday a newly elected conservative MP for the city was the second Iranian lawmaker killed by the virus. Iran has closed schools and universities until early April, as well as suspended major cultural and sporting events and reduced working hours across the country to slow the contagion, which has spread to all of its 31 provinces. Wall Street stocks suffered another bruising session on Friday as investors are panicking over the expected damage of the coronavirus to global economic growth. Peter Tuchman, a stock trader on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, thinks there will be more anxiety before the market settle down.
What we've clearly seen here is a number of weeks of selling. There's definitely panic within the financial community to a certain extent because stocks are trading at a discount of 20, 30, 40%. And we have to realize that 12 trading days ago, or 14, we were at a record high. So big trees fall hard, you know what I mean? A market that the moves are fast and furious, right? Are they reflecting some panic and anxiety? No question about it. Will it eventually settle down? Yes. When we are given all the information. The market can adapt to anything as long as there's clarity, transparency, and honesty, and I don't think we're getting that. I don't particularly think we're getting a strong, honest confidence coming out of our administration here because we've got mixed messages. Our president seems to think that if you make believe this isn't real, it will go away. He thinks when the sun comes out, the virus will be gone. I don't think that's a fact. Historically, epidemics, pandemics do not last forever. They could be 1 quarter or 2 quarters. The reaction is an overreaction. It can be fast and furious, but it doesn't last. So if you're a long-term investor, I would hang in there and see how it turns out. But it's clear. And, you know, so I think the story will evolve into a more anxious story before it gets better.
Global stocks tumbled and oil prices collapsed Friday as investors panicked over the expected damage of the coronavirus to global economic growth. Haven Investments gold and the yen surged as the World Health Organization, or WHO, warned that the epidemic must be taken seriously. At the close of trade, the Paris stock market was down by 4.1%. Frankfurt dove 3.4%, London shed 3.5%, and Milan tumbled 3.7% in a fierce global market sell-off that began about 2 weeks ago. Wall Street stocks also suffered another bruising session, with petroleum producers and banks especially hard hit, as the S&P 500 ended down 1.7%. Oil, already slumping on virus-linked demand fears, extended losses to around 10% as Russia said it had failed to reach an agreement on possible cuts in output at a meeting with OPEC. A 13-year-old U.S. school pupil has filed a complaint with the Federal Civil Rights Office over alleged discrimination due to his Vietnamese descent. Dylan Moriano claims he was targeted at his public school in Los Angeles once news of the coronavirus emerged. He says his teacher sent him to the nurse after he coughed from choking on water, and then retaliated when Moriano asked why non-Asians didn't also have to go see the nurse when they coughed.
Today, we have filed our complaint with the Office of Civil Rights, United States Department of Education, asking for an investigation because we believe that the school and the school district's failure to take meaningful remedial steps to remedy what Dylan was subjected to at his school demonstrates deliberate indifference to Dylan's civil rights, including his right to be free of racial discrimination in a public school.
There have been a lot of painful lessons for our family. One, that adults and teachers in particular don't always do the right thing, although they should. And two, that speaking up and telling the truth doesn't always fix the problem, and in fact can create more problems. And that's the reason why victims don't speak up.
It's funny to a certain point, and it's funny if you know they're joking, but you know, when you don't know they're joking, or when they're being serious about it, or when they just repetitive with it, it kind of gets, you know, annoying, and it's not that funny in the end. It's a serious issue right now, you know, people are dying.
Up next, the coronavirus COVID-19 special report. Eagle News will be right back. Stay with us. You're watching Eagle News, broadcasting from Washington, D.C. I'm Ace Ramirez. Here's Eliza Gonzalez Manglikmot for a coronavirus COVID-19 special report. Let's take a look.
Today we have a sit-down interview with internal medicine physician and former virologist Amarsoldo Sugitan Jr. as he shares with Eagle News things we need to know about the coronavirus COVID-19 that is creating, in some places, mass panic. Dr. Sugitan explains to us, in layman's terms, facts about coronavirus COVID-19.
So COVID-19 is now, what it actually stands for is coronavirus disease 2019. The virus that causes COVID-19, as we are all familiar with, is called a coronavirus. So coronaviruses represent a group of viruses that have been discovered in the 1960s. And these viruses are known to infect both humans and animals. And some animals can transmit these coronaviruses to humans. So some forms of common cold are caused by coronaviruses. So we know of at least 4 of these coronaviruses that are causing the common cold. But it has garnered special attention. Probably you are familiar with the SARS coronavirus epidemic that occurred in about, 2003, in the early 2000s. And that one actually infected about 8,100 people worldwide. And among those that were infected, about 700 plus people actually died. And then in 2012, another coronavirus broke out, and it's called the MERS-CoV. It's the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome. And at that time, it was only confined to the Arabian Peninsula mainly. And for that particular virus, about close to 2,600 people got infected. And out of those, about 30% or so actually also perished. So they're garnering special attention because of all of these outbreaks that come and go. And the COVID-19 virus is also one of these group of viruses.
We asked Dr. Sugitan how far worse COVID-19 is compared to other known coronavirus diseases. Here's what he said.
It's hard to tell because there's still so many things that we don't know yet about COVID-19. But in terms of the number of people that is already affected or infected, it looks like it is actually more easily spread.
Okay.
In terms of the number of people who also get sick,
Okay.
it looks like it's also on its way there.
Okay.
But there's just a lot of unknowns with this particular virus that it's too early to say
Okay.
how it will actually behave. So, but we can just go and look past the other viruses and learn from what they have to teach us.
Given that there are a lot of unknowns about COVID-19, we ask, is this enough reason to panic?
I think people tend to be fearful of what they don't know.
Okay.
So that's probably the reaction that we're getting, all of these fears, all of this hysteria about the virus is that it's new. As the name implies, it's novel, right? Okay. So we don't know exactly how this came to be, although we have some ideas. And right now, there seems to be no treatment for it yet. There's no vaccine yet. And somehow, sometimes the media plays a role in, making a hype out of all of this. But for us just to be able to be informed and be educated about what this virus actually does and what it doesn't, I think that that's the number one thing that you can do to prevent or to fight against fear. So ignorance breeds fear. So the more that you actually shed light and the more that you know about it, then...
Coronavirus COVID-19 has been compared a lot with the influenza virus or the common flu. Dr. Sugitan shares with us how these two present very similar cases.
So with a presentation, if you get infected with the flu viruses, then these are the seasonal flu viruses that we often get, the H1N1, the H3N2, the influenza A, influenza B. So the presentation of the cases when they investigated the first few cases of those infected in Wuhan with a COVID-19 virus, they presented almost all of them have fever.
Okay.
And then about 75% have coughs. Then they also have shortness of breath. And they also have muscle aches. And if you can, as you can tell, all of these are very similar to flu. So it's quite indistinguishable clinically.
Okay.
If you look at the symptoms that these people, infected people have, it's very hard, very difficult to tell whether they get infected by the flu or the coronavirus.
Okay.
So that's why they were saying, so a lot of experts are saying that we should be more mindful and we should be, at least for now, really be more conscious about our vaccination status against the flu, because that's something that we are more likely to get, to contract or actually to be infected with, rather than the COVID-19.
Right now, there is a race to develop the vaccine to help protect against COVID-19. Dr. Sugitan explains to us the tedious process in developing one.
I think that the help that the U.S. government has extended to all of the pharmaceutical companies and their collaboration with them is going to have a big boost in terms of the timeline of vaccine production. But typically, when you do have a vaccine, you should be able to manufacture it on a large scale. So sometimes those technical things are easier to accomplish, but what hampers the development of the vaccine is how are we going to demonstrate that it's safe and that it's effective. And we usually test this first in animal models. And when you give a vaccine, you have to play with the dosing. So you have to find the right dosage that will give you an idea how protective it might be. And when you immunize animals, you have to let them build their own immunity. So it takes time, so probably about 1 month or 2 months, and you have to decide how many doses do you have to administer. 1 dose versus 2 doses, and how far apart from each other should they be. And once you have demonstrated that it's actually safe, how effective is it? So you should be able to challenge them with what we call wild-type virus, the actual virus that's circulating, the COVID-19. And if these animals demonstrate that they can actually resist getting infected, or if they do get infected, that they can resolve their infections quickly, then that's a good sign. But all of these sometimes, so these are in animal models, it does not necessarily always translate that what happens in animal models will also be what is going to be reflected in humans. So there might be some nuances on how we are going to react on it. But the basic limitations in terms of the timeline is just making sure that we demonstrate that it is safe and that it is effective if we are going to vaccinate a lot of people. We have to make sure that those two particular criteria are met. So it usually takes, from their projections, it's about 12 months to 18 months.
Okay.
So we have to understand that vaccine development or production of vaccine, it occurs in several phases. And even the testing of the vaccine, once it's made, also undergoes through these phases. One of the challenges for this particular coronavirus vaccine is that while they were able to probably identify a particular target that the vaccine should be able to block, or the immunity that it will generate will be able to block, we can make those proteins, we can make them to be a little bit immunogenic, or it can be eliciting a good immune response. But we have to make sure that they are safe and that they are effective.
By explaining the process, it seems like it's tedious and it's going to take a while. The UN warns of a fear pandemic because people, they're waiting for how to protect themselves. Why do you think this should be addressed as aggressively as how we are addressing the virus?
Yes, because right now, this fear that you're describing, there has been some recent reports that Asian Americans are unjustifiably being attacked. Some of them, like in New York, there was a lady who was attacked just because she was wearing a mask. And probably the person who attacked her was thinking that she might be spreading the coronavirus just because of her ancestry. And we have to make sure that we also tell people that this is really not the way that the virus will be. The virus does not discriminate who it's going to infect. And if you don't have any of those risk factors, like if you haven't been to the countries where there's still a widespread outbreak of this virus, Iran, China, of course, South Korea, Italy, then you should be able to be, the risk is really low. So we should not target a particular ethnic group or even Asians because that is unfounded fear. So in terms of fear, we already discussed about if you really don't know what it is, then you really will be fearful of it. And the way to just think about how to approach this is just like any respiratory virus. Okay, you always have to have good hand washing precautions. So make sure that your hands are clean. Make sure that if you have not washed your hands, do not touch your face, do not touch your eyes, your mouth, or your nose. So some common sense practices like that. Avoid people who might be sick, or if you are the sick one, take extra precaution not to spread it by wearing a mask, for example, so that you can contain whatever it is and confine it. Okay, isolate yourself if you can. And you can always go and disinfect the surfaces that are typically used in your home. Probably right now, the phones, your phone, because your phone can just be placed on a surface that is not clean, and then when you're taking a call, you might answer it and it's actually near your mouth, near, touching your cheek. So all of these things add up. So those are the precautions that you would do anyway, if it's just the flu or if it's just a common cold. And just taking the same kind of precautions should be the right thing to do in approaching the coronavirus.
You said that the virus does not discriminate. That's when it comes to who it infects,
Yes.
right? But the fatalities are mostly the elderly.
And the elderly.
Isn't that discrimination too?
No, so only because probably it's a good point that you have brought up. But it's usually the elderly, just like in the flu. Most of the people who are typically affected severely are infants, the elderly, and people with chronic conditions. people who have asthma, people who have chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, people who have heart condition, people who actually their immune system is compromised, probably if they're having chemotherapy because they might have cancer, or if they have diabetes. So all of these are risk factors for them to come down. If they do get infected by something like this, then it will take them a little bit longer, or if they have the symptoms, it will be typically more severe because of these other factors that they have. But if you're typically, let's say, a typical healthy person, relatively young, they don't have to fear that much. I'm not saying that they will not be infected. Of course, there will always be an exception. But if they do get infected, the likelihood that it will just be presenting as a mild infection is higher. So that's why we take precautions when we have these relatives who are not too healthy to begin with. That we protect ourselves, that we have to be more cautious when we're around them, because if they do catch it, then the chances that they will have a more serious condition is greater than if we are the ones who actually get infected.
Okay. You mentioned if someone feels like he or she has the virus, or he or she feels sick, it's a precaution to wear a mask,
Yes.
to not spread it. Will masks help also others to protect themselves from
Getting
it?
infected. So I know that there has been some, what is it, panic
Yes,
buying of
no,
masks nowadays. So what the guidelines currently recommend is that only those who are infected, really, should be the ones wearing the mask. Because if you cough, if you sneeze, you're releasing thousands of droplets of secretions that might contain the virus. So it's not really to protect themselves, but to be able to be, containment of this particular secretion so that they cannot spread it to others. If you're relatively healthy, you wear a mask. What studies are saying is that if you will have to use the mask every 20 minutes, because once your mask gets a lot of moisture, so when you're breathing out, there's moisture in there. And in 20 minutes, this kinds of moisture already affects its ability to filter out some organisms. So it's not going to be useful anyway. So only those who are infected should wear it. And for people who are healthy, just make sure that we still follow all of those precautionary measures that I mentioned a while ago. And if you have to cough or if you have to sneeze and you use a tissue, make sure that you throw the tissue straight into the trash. Or if you have to cough and there's really no tissue lying around, always use the sleeve.
The WHO advises the public to take precautionary measures to protect ourselves from getting infected by COVID-19. Dr. Sugitan echoes the same.
Washing with soap and water for at least 20 seconds is still the preferred way. Because if you just wash your hands vigorously, it's very effective, okay? If you have to use a sanitizer, make sure that the alcohol content is at least 60%, okay? So those will work towards decreasing the number of infectious particles on your hands. But it's also very important that we, as I mentioned a while ago, clean all of those surfaces that will typically get contaminated, even the doorknobs that we use. Make sure to clean those because a lot of people touch them, and if they're not really mindful of where their hands have been, so that is also a potential source of infection.
Is the common flu really more of a concern than the coronavirus?
Right now it is, because there's still a lot of people who do not believe that they should get immunized with a flu vaccine every year. They have this myth of if they do get vaccinated with the flu, they will actually get the flu. So that's been a myth that all of the healthcare professionals are trying to combat, okay? But in this particular scenario, you have people who are, or who must be protected, as I've mentioned, the elderly, pregnant women, and all of those who have those comorbid conditions. We should make a real effort to get them vaccinated, because the chances are right now they will have been infected with the flu rather than with a COVID-19 virus.
Dr. Sagitan says although the virus does not discriminate who it infects, there is no reason to panic as long as we remain vigilant and keep ourselves informed.
Just stay cool, stay calm, because this too will pass, okay? If we just add on to the hysteria and all of this fear-mongering, we're not helping the situation. So just make sure that we remain vigilant and we remain updated on what health authorities always have to advise us to do, because they have more expertise in these kinds of situations.
Thank you for joining us. I am Eliza Gonzalez, Manglik Mott, 1 with 25.
Thank you, Eliza. Dr. Amorsolo Sugitan Jr. was part of the team that developed the live attenuated vaccine against the 2009 H1N1 swine influenza pandemic virus. Thank you, Dr. Sugitan. As of today's broadcast, the states of Washington, California, Florida, and Maryland, and New York have declared a coronavirus emergency. That is today's Eagle News. Join us again tomorrow for stories that matter to you. Visit our websites at eaglenews.net and eaglenewslive.com. Follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/eaglenews and on facebook.com/eaglenews. Thank you for watching. I'm Ace Ramirez, 1 with 25.
Bilang ng mga may kaso ng coronavirus disease sa bansa